Hi everyone, welcome back to the Freedom Property Podcast. Delighted today to have Ross Macdonald on. I've known Ross and his business partner Chris Wood from Portolio for quite a few years now. Been working with them quite a bit. We've had Chris on the podcast previously as well, but we thought it'd be good to get his business partner Ross on, get his insights into the property market. They're an estate agency running a business called Portolio. Ross has 20 years experience or over 20 years experience in property, so I'm sure you have some good properties to tell. Good stories to tell. Sorry, not properties. Probably that as well. Ross, it's been great to have you on today. I'm glad that you accepted this. Welcome onto the podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kessa, for inviting me along. It's been good, and I don't know if there's any way of calculating how many views the video with Chris got against how many views that we're going to get today, and then hopefully I can beat him in some capacity.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be our aim. Great. Okay. Well, I suppose for those that don't know you, to start off with, what is your background? Obviously, you've got a lot of experience in property. It'd be good to get to know a bit about that first.
Yeah, so I studied building surveying back in the late 90s. Came out of university around about 2000 with the idea that I was going to become a building surveyor. I couldn't get an immediate work as a building surveyor, so I joined a letting agency run by Alex Watts of Letting Web fame, and it's called Central Letting. We're based in the New Town, and I thought I'd just get a temporary job as a letting agent. And my career as a letting agent spanned until 2016. So I had worked at a few companies. So Central Letting was a great base, good sort of portfolio of properties in around the Newtown area in Edinburgh. Great sort of staff members working with Alex, who's the owner of the company, and Charlie Innes,
Yeah.
who works now at Glenham in Edinburgh, and Colette Ray, who has her own lettings business as well now. So a lot of people sort of moved off that firm into further property careers. So it was a good way to start, sort of understand, the sort of the workings of the property industry. And then, that company was taken over by Grant Property. It was Grant Management at that time. So
Yeah.
it's quite a big sort of that acquisition of the company. So we were integrated into Grant Property. And I was there for a year or so, and then I left to take up a director of another letting agent, a small firm that were based in Trinity at the time called ClickLet. And when I joined them, we had about 123 properties under management, I think correctly, and we grew the portfolio up to just over 400 properties under management. So it was quite a sort of steady growth. Starting at Trinity, we had an office on Leith Walk, and it got to a point where we got to just over 400 properties, and it was sold to Braemore, who were buying quite a lot of letting agents at the time. So they took over the company. I was with Braemore just as a just there to sort of deal with the integration of the business into Braemore. So I was there for 6 months, and then I left the business. But it was great. I really enjoyed being a letting agent. It was a great experience. Obviously, during that period, the amount of legislation that came out was incredible. Between sort of 2000 and 2016, just before the PRT came out. And I was having a little write down of some of the stuff that came out over that period that landlords had to deal with. It was HMOs, interconnected smoke alarms, EICRs, Legionnaires' risk assessments, tenancy deposit schemes, and then heading onto the PRT. But as well as obviously the legislation, they covered a lot of political issues as well during that period. And obviously, financial crisis was one of the sort of main bits that hit the business at that time, and a lot of landlords were stung. And across Scotland, Chris and I at Portolio, and we'll come on to that in a little while, we still sort of speak to people whose valuations of their properties have not recovered since the financial crisis in 2008. Where are we up to? So that was going through the sort of the early days of being a letting agent, and I went through 2 acquisitions where the business I was working with was taken over by another company, because it is something that the bigger companies, the bigger letting agents, do on a regular basis. They do look to acquire smaller companies because it's the best way for them to sort of increase their portfolios. And then, like any company, when they acquire another business, look at ways of taking down the costs. So taking down, can we strip down? They've got lots of people in accounts processing rents coming on a monthly basis. Can they reduce the number of staff members, maybe, or whatever, just to make it a leaner business? And that's what happened on both occasions. And it was good to be involved with both acquisitions, and just adding to that experience of a business taking over another business.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I didn't actually realize that about your background as well. So, and a lot of the business you mentioned there, I'm kind of aware of, and people that you mentioned as well. So that's interesting. So, I mean, still obviously property that you're now involved in, but you transitioned from lettings to now, estate agency. What made you make that switch and set up Portolio?
Well, for the letting agents I worked with, we never touched on sort of sales of properties, and it was always a different. We always felt, although it was quite connected, we always thought it was a sort of different beast altogether, because it was a case of, as a letting agent, there's so many hoops to make sure you comply with and you jump through, and looking to sort of add a state agency onto that was just sort of seemed to be like something else to comply with, and we didn't want to go down that route. But I'd always had a good relationship with Chris, my business partner at Portolio, Chris Wood, and we sort of met up because he had his lettings business in Edinburgh, and when I was working for ClickLet, we often met up and chewed the fat over the property sector and just sort of discussed best practice, really, because there's so many things, so many letting agents out there, and up to a certain point, letting agents didn't want to speak to other letting agents. That was from my experience, because they just didn't want to sort of say how many properties they had under management. Didn't want to give the game away of how they were growing their business or whatever, which is absolutely understandable. But it got to a point, maybe around a certain point around tenant referencing fees, where they were outlawed by the government, and letting agents thought this was a point where the sector had to maybe work together better to make sure that any legislation that was coming in the future was well thought through by the Scottish government before it was implemented. So at that point, letting agents decided to come together, and I always had a good relationship with Chris. We always met up for coffee and said, chew the fat over the businesses we had, the problems we had, and that relationship continued. And then we met up. This must have been about early 2017, when Chris had sort of said, well, I'm thinking about putting together this business Portolio about selling tenanted properties. And at that stage, he was working for a letting agent in Edinburgh as a property sourcer, so finding deals for property investors and stuff like that. And it was all done off market. And Chris really wanted to sort of bring those deals onto the open market, so onto Rightmove, onto Zoopla, and the initial business model we had of Portolio was that we were going to be a web portal for letting agents. We were going to have this web portal similar to Letting Web and CityLets, where letting agents put their available properties on there, and we just couldn't get it to work. So we spent maybe about a year or so trying to get this off the ground, and it just would not fly. So we had to pivot. At that same stage, we got some help through RBS, their accelerator program for new businesses. So we got into their incubator for young businesses, and they helped us put things in place and allowed us to work in their office. We were based in their office in Gogarburn in Edinburgh, and it was a great experience. We were put together with other businesses of a similar age to us, all different sectors. And a lot of the time, again, although they're different sectors, we had shared experiences, and they had similar problems setting up, trying to get off the ground, trying to get investment, or trying to get some traction. So it was a great time. Again, just Chris and I working full pelt, trying to understand why the web portal idea didn't work, and but we understood that actually there was a market there for tenanted property sales. It was just a harness at that, trying to turn Portolio into something that would work for everybody. Investors that are based in the UK looking for investment, investors outside the UK looking to invest in the Scottish market. So that's when we came up with the idea of actually, well, we need to be the estate agent. It's not really for the letting agent to be the estate agent. We needed to be the estate agent, and we put together a business model that allowed us to be the estate agent in every part of Scotland, because we sell properties across Scotland. So maybe I should talk a little bit about actually what we do rather than the setup for the business. So for anybody that doesn't know, Portolio is the estate agency for landlords. So we are solely focused on landlord-to-landlord sales market. So landlords looking to sell tenanted properties to landlords that are looking to buy tenanted properties. And obviously the benefit there to both sides, as well as a benefit to the tenant, because the tenant doesn't get kicked out of their property. They get to stay in the property throughout the transaction. So we've been in business since 2017. We've had that pivot where we've changed from being the web portal to the estate agent, and it's working. I mean, obviously, COVID has had a little bit of benefit to the business, because for a long period of time, there's been a 6-month notice period that landlords need to give to their tenants if they want to sell the property or move the tenant on, and that's given us probably more business over the last year in our infancy than we were expecting or had sort of mapped out in our business strategy, which has just probably propelled us to a point where we're probably, hopefully, we're more of a well-kent face, if I could use that description. That people
definitely are. I've seen your growth as well over the years, which has been fantastic to see. It'd probably be good to kind of cover off just kind of, because it is quite a niche, sort of sector that you've gone into. Rather than being just just a state agency for everybody, you're catering for landlords and in particular sort of tenanting properties. How did you guys come up with the idea? And it'd be interesting to kind of touch on that topic.
Yeah, well, again, because of Chris's experience of property sourcing just prior to us setting up the business, he was aware there was loads of deals done off market on a regular basis, but a lot of the deals were done probably in a way where Chris got frustrated a lot of the time. Deals would fall down quite quickly in certain situations when they were done off market, because maybe there was no home reports and there's no sort of professional marketing photographs or virtual tours that we've got now, and Chris sort of tapped into the idea. So if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that we do this differently to how a property sourcer would source a deal for a client. So we had to make sure that we almost appeared as if we were a normal estate agent.
Yeah.
So did everything a normal estate agency would do. So we've got home reports. We've got professional marketing photographs. We've got virtual tours, and we advertise on Rightmove and Zoopla. So we do everything that a traditional estate agency do. The USP for us is that we have got every property that we sell on our website has got a tenant in situ. So and it's sold as an investment purchase, and it's sold at a fixed price.
Yeah.
Because we just felt that this was the way it worked best for us. So, and it obviously worked best for investors, because they were finding it difficult to source properties on the open market, because they were getting outbid on a regular basis from home buyers. Yeah. So the landlord-to-landlord sales market removes home buyers from that process. So you can pick up a property without having to compete with a home buyer at closing date. And the home buyer is the person that sort of inflates the price a little bit, quite a bit, because they're driven by emotions in their purchase, which is rightly so. They come around to a property, they have a look at it, and they say, "That's a nice kitchen. I can see myself making a lasagna in that kitchen or something else in that kitchen. It's a nice dining room. I can see myself having a breakfast there. It's a nice lounge. I can see myself relaxing and chilling out there. So I'm going to chuck everything at it to try and get that property." And they might pay quite a bit over the home report for it. So investors can't do that. They have to be very much driven by what it says on the spreadsheets, what they don't want to pay, because it comes out of their pocket. You'll know you've got the mortgage and anything over that, they're going to have to dip into their own pocket, pay it. They've got their additional dwelling supplement to pay on top of that as well. So that's something that the home buyer doesn't take into consideration. So
Yeah.
there's various factors there that makes it more attractive, we feel, for an investor to buy a property with a tenant in situ than to go onto Rightmove or Zoopla and try and compete with a home buyer and try and buy a property that way. Plus, the aspect that the tenant remains in the property is really good. We're hearing loads of stories at the moment about properties disappearing off the PRS, and that's a bad thing. We want the PRS to remain as buoyant as possible because it plays an important role in Scotland's housing. And if we can
Absolutely.
keep the properties in the PRS, then that's a benefit. And I never actually run through the benefits of from a landlord selling or a landlord buying. Is that worthwhile doing it, or is it?
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see some of the benefits myself, but it'd be good for you to kind of touch on those as well, please.
I don't want to do too much self promotion though, Tessa, and it's
Yeah,
not.
it's going to get
But
paid
yeah,
now.
but certainly from the landlord selling the property, the process starts immediately. So you don't need to wait. Well, up to the 31st of March, it was 6 months notice period. Now you only have to wait 3 months, no, up to 3 months or 2 months or maybe a month, depending on what type of tenancy agreement you've got in place. But essentially, if you're selling with a tenants in situ, you can start the process immediately. You don't have to wait for tenants to vacate. And the big part of the process is tenants don't have to vacate. So you might have a good as a landlord, you might have a good relationship with your tenants. You might not wish to move them out of their home because the tenant sees the property as their home. The landlord might see the property as their investment. It's a different sort
Yeah,
of view of looking at the property. And you get to sell the property as is. So you don't need to spruce it up for the sales markets. You don't need to put a lick of paint on the walls. You don't need to reseal around the bath or touch up in the grouting. I mean, if any good landlord is making sure that that type of thing is attended to anyway during the tenancy or when the property is up for relet, and you continue to receive rental income right up to the final day you stop becoming the legal owner of the property. So you've got that
yeah,
continuity. There's no void periods. There's no utility bills to pay, and there's no sort of as soon as the tenant stops paying rent, you haven't going to have to pay your mortgage rates, and you just don't have that issue. And obviously, the
yeah,
benefits of buying a tenanted property from the investor picking the property up is that you get instant rental income on day one of ownership. So you get a fully compliant property. The price includes all the inventory items, so it could come with all the furniture. You don't need to sort of have that faff of running out to IKEA to fill your car with stuff to furnish your investment. It's already here. It's everything that's on the inventory, and you're not competing against a home buyer to purchase the property. So there's huge benefits to buying a tenanted property. I know it doesn't fit with everybody's strategy, and there's a lot of investors out there that like to sort of add value immediately to a property and refinance it, as you're aware of. And this one is a sort of maybe more of a slow burner where you buy the property with a tenant in situ, you start getting that rental income on day one of ownership. And when that tenant comes around to move out, when they finally do come around to move out, you can maybe add the value there and
yeah.
refinance at that particular point.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, you're right. There is investors that want to add the value straight away, but often that's kind of quite time intensive as well. So you've got to factor that in. It's almost a job in itself doing that. Whilst doing it through your way, it is kind of purely an investment. Or there's still some input from you, but you're getting cash flow from day one, and you can probably easily work out your numbers as well because you know what your rent will be, your purchase price, and if you've got finance involved and anything else as well, you can kind of tally all that up, and you can kind of see if it's going to be a good investment or not. Whilst with a property that you're going to buy that's empty and you need to add value to, there's a lot of variables there as well. You don't know what's going to be, behind kind of the plasterboard and stuff like that. So there could be some additional cost there as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. It's great to hear. It's kind of so surprising that there's not other people doing this as well. You guys are the main people in Scotland doing it, or the only people in Scotland doing this, as far as I know. So
Well,
yeah.
yeah, that's the main focus for our business. I know there's other letting agents out there that maybe do have an estate agency arm that are selling recycling properties on their own portfolio. So
Yeah.
their landlords looking to sell to landlords looking to buy. So there is tenanted property sale transactions going through with other agents, but we're the only agent that's solely sort of focused on that. And as well as individual property sales, we're doing a lot of more portfolio sales as well. So we've had a lot of landlords come to us over the last 12 months or so, thinking that now's the time to exit the market and sell their portfolio, and we can sort of facilitate a sale around that as well. We've got lots of investors who are got different search criteria. Some people are maybe just looking for one property. Some people are looking for bigger jumps and looking for that portfolio purchase.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, talking about portfolio purchases, then you've seen a lot more investors looking at portfolios now. Maybe for a few reasons. One, they're starting to expand and want to buy, chunks of properties at a time rather than individual ones. But also the potential savings that they can have in ADS as well. Buying 6 or more. So you're finding kind of more investors wanting to buy these properties for that reason.
Yeah, because as well as the ADS, the removal of ADS for purchases over 6 properties, you'll often find there's maybe sometimes a little bit of a discount being offered as well when you're buying them all together. So you calculate up all the valuations of the properties, and maybe there's a discount given. Not everybody's offering the discount, but sometimes there can be a discount being offered for purchasing the portfolios together. And some people like it. Some people like buying properties all within the same stairwell or all within the same geographical area.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a desire from certain individuals to buy a portfolio as opposed to buying a individual tenanted property sales, and they'd probably get to where they want to get to quite quick, because rather than buying up one this year and then one next year and then one the following year, they've got 6 altogether straight away, and then they just sort of, well, that's me got, I've done it, I've accelerated my goals immediately. Then they can maybe reevaluate those goals in a year's time, to see how, because you always, every landlord we speak to has always got some kind of exit strategy, or should have some exit strategy about what the reason is they're in buy to let in the first place. Because everybody's different, and we speak to a lot of clients on a regular basis, and obviously previous jobs that I've been in with the letting agent business, everybody had different criteria for being a landlord. Some were accidental landlords, some were landlords that just bought a property for their kids at university, and they had that property, and rather than sort of selling it once their child left university, they decided to let it out on a regular basis. Other landlords have got the property portfolio to fund their pension, to fund their retirement. So everybody's slightly different. You'll get what generally is the. I'm going to ask you a question now, Kess.
Yeah, go for it.
Too long. What do you find often when investors come to you? What's their strategy? What's their ultimate goals for buying a buy-to-let?
Yeah, I think the main reason is for sort of an additional income stream. And kind of the name of my business, sort of financial freedom, is probably one of the biggest reasons that people invest in property that I speak to on a daily basis anyway. They want to have that additional income. There may be, especially since COVID as well, work can be up and down. A lot of people that are in maybe a job that they're not necessarily happy with, or want to kind of reduce the hours down as well, and eventually kind of become a full-time property investor. But yeah, definitely sort of additional income stream is probably the main goal for most investors that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Especially with the new regulations involved and stuff like that, I think most people need to really treat it as a business nowadays, as opposed to just being an accidental landlord and just rent it out, without kind of thinking about all the regulations and things involved. But it'd be interesting, because you touched on that topic just previously there, about some properties being removed from sort of the rental sector as well, and I found that even with my rents, they've gone up. There's much more demand for rental properties. Obviously you're speaking to landlords as well. Where are these properties going? Are they going? It'd be interesting to kind of get your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, well, this seems to. I read the the most recent CityLets report that said that from the agent's perspective, rental demand is so strong across most parts of Scotland at the moment, because there just isn't the same stock. So properties have come off must have come off the rental market recently, and it's something that I think I read something in the last couple of days that John Blackwood was worried about. The impact on the proposed changes in the PRS that the Scottish Government are pushing through at the moment, or consulting on at the moment. He's worried about those changes, how will just result in less properties being on the PRS in Scotland. So, but going back to your question about why are landlords selling at the moment, we very rarely hear this, the excuse or the reason for selling your property at the moment is because the changes in legislation.
Mm.
We hear that we've just come to the end of the buy-to-let journey. They're looking to release equity to buy a family home somewhere. They're looking to release equity to start a business, various things. But the change in legislation very rarely comes up. It's always other reasons. And quite often when a landlord's had the property for 20, 25 years and they're just looking to release the equity before they get to retirement or before they transfer it onto their kids or whatever. It's not legislation that comes up. I mean, we discussed at the start the amount of legislation that's been here since sort of 2000. It hasn't deterred because since
No.
the PRS has almost tripled in size since the late 90s. So therefore, none of the legislation has deterred anyone from becoming a landlord. And even with the legislation, even the political changes that have happened, Brexit or the financial crisis or the first IndyRef or the 2 years of the pandemic, it hasn't changed the desire that people still think that actually property is still a solid long-term investment to supplement retirement or just to give you an additional income. And
Yeah.
because property prices have gone up, I was looking at something the other day. I had to write down the stat, Kessie. I was looking at something the other day that said that last year the Bank of Scotland had said the average property prices in Scotland had gone up 8.8%, and that was against the UK average of. This was the average Scottish property price has gone up 8.8%, and that was against the UK average of 6.2%. So property prices in Scotland have gone up higher than the UK average. And then you think, well, what areas are going up? Is it Edinburgh and Glasgow? So immediately you think that those are the areas. But it isn't. It's other areas. It was like Motherwell had the highest increase last year,
Right, they did.
17.3. And then you're looking at other areas below them on the list: Hamilton, Dumfries, Kilmarnock, Elgin, Perth, Paisley. I mean, these are. So if you've got a property in those areas, you're seeing a significant increase in property prices, and then you're thinking, actually, you know what? Where is my money best held? Is it best held in a bank? Is it best held in some stocks and shares, or is it best held in bricks and mortar? Most people, well, the people that we work with, have found that property is still a good long-term investment because that capital growth outweighs any of the legislation changes that happen.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that, and I think you've put that really well because I've seen that myself as well. Often in the news, we kind of constantly see, landlords are exiting the market in droves and stuff like that. Well, actually, for the ones that sell, I'd imagine there's probably kind of, far more buyers than there is sellers. Because are you finding that as well? Because I know your agency is obviously very different because you're attracting landlords and investors. Then, do you have more buyers than you have sellers?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So last year we sold 109 tenanted properties across Scotland, and the stats sort of had, what was it? We had a 51% increase in our database. So we've got a database of investors, and they're not all hot leads. Some are sort of mixed between people that are ready to move, some people that are just maybe just looking at the market, making sure that you see what the properties are out there. Some people are letting agents and mortgage brokers like yourself that just want to make sure that they get our updates so they can pass it on to their clients. So the level of interest in what we're doing has significantly increased, which has coincided with an 86% increase in our website traffic. So there's a lot more people jumping on our website. So for everybody that comes to us and says, I'm thinking of selling, there's another person that comes to us and says, you know what, I'm thinking about investing in property. And it might be that they're just expanding their current portfolio that they've got, or it might be that they're looking to do it for the first time. So we sort of hold their hand through the process. And Chris and I think that actually this is buying a property through Portolio or buying a tenanted property, either through us or someone else, is probably the easiest way to start with property investment. Because if you're not wanting to be too hands-on, you don't really have to do very much work. You see a property, you buy it, the property is already tenanted, it's all furnished, it's all the compliance. You don't need to worry about sort of making smoke alarms or all the safety certification in place. So it becomes quite easy because it's not everybody that wants to sort of rip out a bathroom or put in a new kitchen or whatever. Some people just don't have the time to do that. So
Yeah.
this gives them the ability to actually invest in property with very little hassle. But yeah, we are finding a lot of people, and a lot of people are, not only UK investors. I think there's some kind of stat out there. I've not written it down, so I don't know off the top of my head. That tells us how many, the majority of, I think it's 80% of landlords in Scotland are based in the UK, and majority of them either have one or two properties. That's it. But there's a interest. There's obviously a small percentage, 20% of people that live outside the UK that are interested in the UK property market, and we've got had a lot of investors from Hong Kong buying properties in Scotland, and they're interested in lots of different areas. So there's definitely Scottish properties is of interest to people around the world, not only
Yeah.
those in the UK that know it, that live here and know it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That because I know we've worked together on some of these clients, and so there obviously the expats, moved away, but there's also sort of foreign investors as well. What's that? What do you think is the attraction to Scotland and property investment here in the UK?
Well, the property market is pretty different in different parts of Scotland. So I think sometimes they're attracted to how cheap some of the properties might appear to them to be.
Hmm.
So we've sold a couple of properties recently in Paisley and to overseas investors, and they couldn't quite understand, how cheap the properties were and the yield that they were getting back for it. But
Right.
so it's just, I suppose, it's just that. So they see it as a good long-term investment for investing in Scottish property is pretty sound, and if they've got a tenant, a long-term tenant that's sometimes the tenants that we have are long-term tenants, so they don't even have any or have any complications with thinking about trying to find a new tenant. It's long-term tenants are great because they're in there, they're paying the rent, they're looking after the properties if it's their own. So it's great to facilitate a sale to an investor either UK or overseas, where the tenant gets to remain in the property after the sale completes. And we have this thing on our website where we list the properties at the current rent and list the properties at the market rent. And sometimes the current rent and the market rent can be slightly different depending
Yeah.
on how long the tenancy's been. And you can only really jump up to the market rent if the tenant, was to decide to vacate the property. Although most landlords or letting agents should probably be looking at the rent on an annual basis and having a look and seeing, can we review it, can we put up a little bit for the current tenants? It might only be £15 or £20, but it goes up a little bit on a regular basis. That's something that you probably should, do as a landlord, or if your letting agent does it. I know the PRT allows you to do a rent review once every 12 months.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah. On the flip side, though, sometimes trying to push too high of a rent, your tenant could leave, and then you got the cost of, that void period, and then remarketing it, and potentially start refurbishing that property as well. So, often
Yeah,
we can find, don't we, that landlords try to have that balance. But it's an interesting point that you said there actually as well, which I don't think we touched on before. A lot of landlords have relationships, with these with their tenants. They've known them for many years. As I've known, a lot of my tenants for many years now as well, and we don't want them to kind of vacate that property. That's kind of their property, isn't it? So I think that's kind of another key thing about selling a tenanted property, that then they can continue to stay in that property for as long as they like.
yeah, because a lot of the times as soon as a client gives us a property to sell, we get in contact with the tenant and we have a chat with them and we explain what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and we need their help, because we need their help to get access for the home report. We need their help for access for the marketing photographs, and we need their help for access for viewings, etc. If any physical viewings are required. But in return for that, we're hoping to keep them in their home, and a lot of them are really they're really super helpful when
Right.
we speak to them, because they want to remain in their homes. And as I said earlier, the landlord should view the property as an investment and making sure that the investment works for them. The tenant just sees the property as their home, and they in most cases, when we contact them, they're not ready to leave. If they want to leave, the PRT allows them to give a month's notice and vacate. So they want to do it on their terms. They don't want to be dictated by the landlord thinking of selling. So selling with the tenant in situ allows them to hold on in their home for however long they wish to do so.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what sort of challenges are you kind of finding, now kind of coming into sort of 2022 when we're recording this? From what I can see from my side, I think the EPC challenge is going to be a big one going forward, which a lot of people aren't maybe aware of. But what sort of challenges are you seeing with Portolio and landlords?
Well, I suppose the challenges this year will be inflation, what's going to happen to interest rates, the cost of living crisis, perhaps, um, consumer confidence. Where is it because of what's happening with Russia and Ukraine? I think consumer confidence has dipped a little bit.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously been increases in oil and gas prices. But those are probably short term. I think we'll ride that sort of wave over. I don't know if that's an expression that people use. I don't think it is. I've just made that one up. But I think people will that will be a short term, like I suppose like COVID, because COVID, the economy has recovered to pre-pandemic levels within 2 years. Now
Yeah.
it took 5 years for the economy to recover during the financial crisis. So that's it. That 2 years it has been incredibly quick, but the challenges that landlords have probably are to do with that consultation that's going through the Scottish Parliament at the moment. And I've just written down a few things here. The EPC ratings are a big issue because I think by 2025 there's going to be an expectation that during a change of tenancy you have to get your property up to an EPC rating of C. And if there's no change of tenancy up until 2028, that's when you have to get to a level to see. I don't think the EPC things are set in stone yet, but I think this is the guidance the Scottish Government want to get to. And by all properties, I think by 2033, they want to get to a C. And I think there's a green heat task force that's been set up by the Scottish Government to sort of review this. But we're already seeing at the moment from mortgage providers not wanting to give mortgages out to properties that are below sort of D. We've had a few issues recently, and there's one a sale that we're completing on at the moment where the sale's been held up, or the owner does the necessary work to improve the EPC rating, so the buyer can get a mortgage approved at a higher EPC rating. But what do you find? What's the minimum EPC rating that you're able to give out mortgages at the moment? Is it E?
Yes, E. Yeah. So if it's an F or a G just now, there's not really any lenders that will lend. So in that instance, you either have to buy the property cash or on some sort of short-term finance or bridging finance typically. But another great way is if you can work with the landlord and say, look, can we just do these works prior to the sale and then get an updated EPC, even just kind of get it through to an E, because sometimes it can be quite minimal things that you need to do, just change some light bulbs, add a hot water jacket, or to the tank. It could hopefully be kind of something as small as that to get it to an E. But yeah, so that's kind of the big challenge just now. And I suppose as regulation kind of increases, then that will kind of have a restriction for these purchases as well. And that's only on the landlord market, not for people buying their own home, obviously.
Yeah, but it will get there eventually. I think most things that go through the rental EPCs will come in. Well, the EPC minimum standards will come into. I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, we lost you for a second, but you're back though.
Sorry,
if you could say the last sentence again, sorry.
No, I'm just saying that a lot of the things that come in the PRS, like smoke alarms, have come into private homes.
Right.
So the EPCs, will eventually minimum standards EPCs will come into private homes eventually. I think the problem they've got is the Scottish Government still to clarify the regulations around EPCs and how it's going to differ from property to property. So if you're in a listed building in a conservation area, it becomes quite difficult for you to improve your EPC rating. So is there going to be exemptions for that type of property as opposed to a new build, which becomes a bit easier to sort of make sure that you've got the EPC rating which is acceptable? So the EPC ratings are something that's going to hit landlords soon. I think now is the time to review your EPC rating. Now is the time to think about what work is required, price the work up. If it's going to be expensive, start saving now to get the work ready for the work done. If it isn't going to be expensive, just do the work. Just get the work done. It's going to be a benefit to your tenant if your tenant's in there, because they're going to have it's going to be more energy efficient, so it might cut down on their energy bills at a time when energy bills are going up. So they'll be happy with that. So that's still something to tackle. So this whole new deal for tenants is also the consultation that's going through the Scottish Government as well, is also something that landlords need to be aware of. There's various factors involved in that. It's a vote winner for the SNP, definitely. The SNP are doing it, or the Green Party are doing it because there's anything that's a benefit to tenants is is uh, is is something that the Scottish Government look favourably on,
Yeah.
don't they? But they're going to create sort of a tenant union. They're going to be looking at rent caps, their rent pressure zones. They're doing a PRS regulator. It all sounds fairly sort of substantial. And it was just that, about a year ago, there hadn't been any new regulations that come in for a wee while into the PRS. And this seems to be like, over the next few years, there's going to be loads.
Yeah.
And landlords, I suppose, need to be wary of it. I just worry that the Scottish Government are trying to force out private landlords out of the sector, like people that have got the individual properties. And this is the majority of properties in the sector are just 1 or 2 bedroom properties. And these are the guys that the sector needs. Yet the Scottish Government seem to be making it difficult for them. And they sort of favour institutional landlords. So the build to rent sector is quite big at the moment, and they're expanding that. And I just feel that it's wrong for the Scottish Government to be doing that. But this is where the landlords need to step up and reply to the consultation and put their views across there. Because if they don't, you can't complain again. You can't complain about the changes. And if you do, there's just a chance. Maybe it's a small chance, but there's a chance that they might just listen.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ross. So for people that don't know, where can they find out about these things, and where can they put the views across?
There's you can jump onto the Scottish Government website, and maybe you can sort of send something out. I don't know how
Yeah, we will
that'll
do.
work, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's a link on it where there's a consultation, so you can jump on that. You can click through and read the consultation. It's quite a few pages, and then give them your views. And I'd urge anybody that's a stakeholder in the PRS, whether you're a landlord or you're a tenant, or you're a letting agent, or some association with the PRS to put your views across.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to kind of see how this all pans out. From my view, when it comes to regulation, sometimes it can be a pain, but um, I find with that there comes opportunities as well, ultimately. So, sometimes I actually kind of welcome regulation, and if you're able to kind of jump through those hoops that they require you to go through, actually, there might be kind of less investors there, which I know is ultimately not the right thing, for the PRS sector. But for those that can kind of, manage to jump through those hoops, actually when they get to the end there, there can be some opportunities there available.
Well, what's going to happen is if if landlords leave the sector, there'll be less properties, demand will still be there, and the rents will go up. And
Yeah,
obviously, that's not what the Scottish Government are looking to do, but
no,
or enforce in the sector. But that's what's going to happen. I, it's not everybody. It's not every. So I think the Scottish Government look at it and think that everybody that's renting, every tenant that's renting, wants to be on the property ladder. It's not the case. Some tenants like to have that flexibility of renting, and that might be because of um, employment, and they're in a city for a certain time on a contract, and that just might suit them to rent. Or it might be that they want to stay in a location they can't technically buy in, so the renting offers that um, offers that opportunity. They might want to share with someone, so they might want that company rather than
yeah,
sort of living on their own. They might want to live with someone and share the bills, etc. Or they might not. As a tenant, you don't need to pay any maintenance.
yeah,
You might want to. You might not. Let the landlord pays for the cost of maintaining the boiler and all the appliances and stuff like that. They might quite like that. So it's not every tenant that wants to be a homeowner. So the Scottish Government sort of, I suppose, need to understand that. And there's a lot of the landlords that we work with are just ordinary people. Ordinary. We did a survey recently, and we termed it. It was ordinary people making a positive difference, because it was not these are not the fat cat landlords that you often get portrayed on the media, that they're not sitting on their yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean with a big spreadsheet with all their properties, constantly tinkering with their prices on the rent, or deciding not to attend to maintenance or whatever. It's so far removed from the truth. It's incredible. And these guys, the majority of landlords that we work with are are really good. They're looking after the properties. They're providing great accommodation. They're proactive. They've got good relationships with their tenants, and they should be respected and they should be looked after by the Scottish government, as opposed to what we think is happening at the moment. And there are just no incentives to become a landlord or to provide quality accommodation for tenants.
Yeah, and that's you put that really well. That's really good. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. And you said kind of about build to rent as well. Are you kind of seeing that starting to get more and more popular now as well?
It is. It's taken a bit of time for those projects to come to Scotland, but I think it might be the case that large organisations. I think am I right in saying that John Lewis recently announced that
Yep.
they were getting into
Right,
the rental sector. So John Lewis, other companies, big organisations becoming lease landlords, and maybe that's the way that things are going. The Scottish government will be looking at those guys more favourably than the guys that got one and two bed properties.
Yeah. Right, Russell, it's been fantastic listening to you today. I think your wealth of knowledge, really kind of shines through the fact that you kind of been in the industry for so long, and you and Chris, very much involved, when it comes to, all the regulation. You're very kind of hot onto that. Where can people find out more about you? Because I know you guys do a lot of content. I'm not going to kind of mention, I'll let you kind of mention this, but I know you're on lots of different platforms where you do kind of lots of different things. Where can people best find you?
Yeah, well, obviously our website is the best place to find us, portolio.co.uk. We try and produce loads of regular blogs that are content for either buyers or sellers or anybody looking to invest in the sector. And we're across all the various social media platforms. We try to keep up with you, Kessa. I know that you're a social media animal. We try our hardest to sort of to try and keep up with you. But yeah, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. We're not on TikTok yet, but yeah, exactly. But I'm sure that will sort of come along at some point. But yeah, we're just trying to give out as much free information as possible to make it, and we're very approachable. So if anybody's got any questions about tenanted properties, either from a buying perspective or selling perspective, get in contact with us. We're happy to have a chat, give out our advice, and then allow you to make an informed decision about what's best for you.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely one thing I've noticed kind of working with you guys as well. You always kind of try to be as fair as possible for both sides of the party, because obviously you're working, for the interest of the seller, but you need to make it work for the buyer as well. And that really kind of shines through on the transactions that I've seen you guys work on. So, right, Ross, it's been great speaking to you today. Definitely for all the viewers, I hope you've enjoyed that today as well. Definitely connect with Ross and his business partner, Chris, as well. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Ross, it's been great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kessa.